The city glittered beneath Logan Whitmore's penthouse windows, like a field of shattered diamonds. Manhattan was never quiet. Even silence here had a rhythm, the hum of ambition, the throb of money, the sigh of exhaustion. Logan watched it all from behind glass, holding a glass of scotch that had long since gone warm. The invitation lay on the marble counter cream paper, gold trim, his sister's handwriting looping across it, like laughter from another life. Emily and Daniel, December 17th, Prescott Estate. It should have made him happy. Instead, it made him feel exposed. Weddings did that. They were mirrors, reflecting not what you had, but what you lacked. And Logan Whitmore, for all his billions, lacked someone who would stay. His assistant's voice cut through the stillness. "Sir, the RSVP deadline is tomorrow. Shall I?" "Put me down as attending," he said without turning. "And the +1. He exhaled, slow and tired. "Find someone suitable." The words tasted hollow, yet necessary. In his world, image was oxygen. Appear alone, and people whispered about loneliness. Appear attached, and they whispered about power. Logan preferred the latter. He wasn't proud of the thought, but pride was a luxury, and he'd already traded too many illusions to keep his empire standing. Across the East River, Brooklyn was awake in a different way. The hum of the subway, the smell of coffee and sawdust, the low murmur of lives stitched together by persistence rather than privilege. Amara Johnson brushed paint from her fingertips, staring at the half-finished mural that covered her studio wall. "Breathe," she whispered to herself, though she wasn't sure if she meant the wall or her own heart. Her studio was her sanctuary and her battlefield. Rent overdue, client payments delayed, and the email from the bank blinking on her phone like a warning light. Still, she refused to let fear stain her work. Each stroke of color, each curve of light, was her defiance against the gravity of circumstance. When the phone rang, she almost ignored it. Unknown number. Unknown numbers rarely brought good news, but something instinct perhaps made her answer. "Ms. Johnson." The voice was polite, clipped, expensive. "This is Patricia Lang from the Whitmore Group." Amara frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "I think you've got the wrong mistake. Mr. Whitmore is seeking a companion for a social engagement, a formal appearance. 3 days, all expenses covered. Compensation, considerable." There was a pause, the kind that fills rooms. Amara laughed, because disbelief was easier than hope. "You mean, like, a date, a companion?" Patricia corrected smoothly. "Professional, elegant, discreet. I'm a designer, not a model. That's precisely why he chose your name." The line buzzed faintly, like the world had tilted. "How did he—" "Your work appeared in an architectural feature last spring. Mr. Whitmore admired your perspective. He believes you would balance him." Balance. The word lodged somewhere in her chest, sharp and strange. "I'll send the details." Patricia continued. "If you're interested, confirm by midnight." When the call ended, the room felt suddenly smaller, as if the air itself was deciding whether to stay or leave. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She replayed the conversation, the tone of certainty in Patricia's voice. She opened her laptop and searched Logan Whitmore. The screen filled with his image, the kind of man headlines loved: tall, sharp-suited, expression like cut glass, CEO of Whitmore Holdings, real estate and tech, one of Forbes' youngest billionaires, the kind of man who owned more cities than most people could dream of visiting. But what caught her was a single candid photo, him standing in the rain outside a charity gala. No umbrella, coat unbuttoned, eyes distant. Something about it tugged at her memory, like a thread she couldn't quite grasp. A year ago, during a thunderstorm, she'd opened her studio door to a stranger drenched, silent, his face half hidden by rain and night. She'd offered him coffee, a towel, a moment of shelter. He'd thanked her with a voice that trembled between exhaustion and disbelief. When she turned back to offer him another cup, he was gone, leaving only the scent of rain and cedarwood behind. Could it have been him? The thought felt absurd, and yet her heartbeat disagreed. Morning broke with reluctant light. Manhattan's skyline shimmered in frost, while Brooklyn woke to the sound of delivery trucks and coffee machines. Amara found herself standing in front of her mirror, holding the business card that came with Patricia's email. 3 days, she murmured. 3 days for 5 months of rent. But it wasn't just the money. Somewhere beneath practicality, curiosity stirred. What kind of man hired strangers to pretend they belonged beside him? And why her? She typed her acceptance before she could change her mind. Logan read the confirmation with a nod that barely registered as satisfaction. Brooklyn, Patricia said. She'll be here at 3. Good, he replied, scanning the portfolio attached. She's not like the others, Patricia added carefully. No media presence, no scandals. Smart, independent. Exactly what I need, Logan said. But even as he spoke, a flicker of uncertainty passed through him, that rare, almost forgotten sensation of anticipation. He told himself it was about optics, convenience, control. Yet somewhere deeper, unacknowledged, something older stirred curiosity. Maybe. Or the memory of rain on skin. At 3 sharp, the elevator doors slid open, and Amara stepped into his office. Logan looked up from behind the glass desk, and for a moment, time folded. She wasn't what he expected. No glitter, no perfume cloud, just quiet confidence wrapped in a cream blouse and jeans. Her hair, a soft halo against her dark skin. Her presence filled the room, not with noise, but with gravity. Mr. Whitmore, she said, extending a hand. Miss Johnson. Their handshake was brief, but electric. Neither admitted it. But both felt the pulse, that thin thread of recognition humming between them, like the low note of a cello. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to the chair opposite. She glanced around the office, sleek, modern, all glass and metal, no warmth. A man who lived in reflections. You wanted a companion, she said. May I ask why? The directness startled him. People usually danced around him, words laced with calculation, but her gaze was level, almost gentle. My sister's wedding, he said finally. She worries I'll turn into one of those rich men who only show up with a new face each season. I'd like to prove her wrong. By hiring a stranger, by choosing the right one, he countered, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Something flickered in her eyes, amusement, disbelief, something in between. "And what makes you think I'm right for this?" He studied her. "You don't seem impressed." "I'm not," she admitted. "That's kind of my thing." Logan laughed softly, the kind of sound that seemed surprised to exist. "Good," he said. "I've had enough of people who are—" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was alive, charged with unspoken questions. After they went over logistics, flight, wardrobe, schedule, Amara rose to leave. But at the door, she turned. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "you don't have to pretend to be less lonely than you are. Not with me." The honesty landed like a blow wrapped in silk. For a heartbeat, Logan forgot how to breathe. She smiled, a small, knowing thing, and left. When the door closed, he realized the office smelled faintly of lavender and paint. That night, Logan stood by his window again. The city stretched beneath him in glitter and distance. He thought of her words, of how easily she'd seen through the armor it had taken him years to build. He poured another glass of scotch, but didn't drink it. Instead, he found himself remembering a night of rain, a small studio, a voice saying, "You look like someone who needs warmth more than shelter." The memory bloomed fully now, the woman, her laugh, the storm. It had been her. He sat down, the realization both startling and inevitable. Fate, it seemed, had a way of circling back, not in grand gestures, but in quiet symmetry. Across the river, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts restless. She tried to dismiss the memory, the rain-soaked stranger, the eyes that had haunted her for months. But now she knew his name, his world, his distance, and something inside her whispered that she was stepping into more than a contract. A part of her wanted to run from the risk, the imbalance, the ghosts of stories that never ended well. But another part, braver, quieter, wanted to see where this thread might lead. She reached for her sketchbook and began to draw two silhouettes under an umbrella, standing on opposite sides of a city. Between them, a bridge made of light. When she closed the book, dawn had begun to touch the edges of the sky. In a penthouse high above Fifth Avenue, Logan glanced at his phone one last time before bed. Her file lay open on the screen, her work, her interviews, a short note she'd written years ago for an art exhibit. Design is not about beauty. It's about belonging. He stared at the sentence, feeling it settle somewhere inside him. For the first time in years, he didn't fall asleep to the sound of silence, but to the faint hum of anticipation, the sense that something, or someone, had shifted the axis of his carefully balanced world. Outside, Manhattan shimmered in sleepless light, unaware that two souls, one wrapped in privilege, one in persistence, had begun orbiting each other once again. And somewhere between their two worlds, destiny exhaled softly, as if whispering, "This time, don't look away." The elevator glided to a stop on the 63rd floor, a soft chime cutting through the hum of air conditioning. Amara's reflection in the mirrored panel looked calm, but her pulse betrayed her, a steady, deliberate thrum under her skin. The world she was about to step into wasn't hers. She reminded herself of that fact, the way one might check the depth of water before diving. The doors opened, revealing the reception of Whitmore Holdings, a cathedral of glass and quiet money. Everything gleamed: marble floors, chrome fixtures, the kind of art that whispered of power rather than beauty. People moved like clockwork, efficient, precise, polished to invisibility. Ms. Johnson, the assistant from the phone call. Patricia appeared, immaculately put together, voice smooth as linen. Mr. Whitmore will see you now. Amara followed her down a hallway lined with panoramic windows. The city sprawled beneath them, its skyline a heartbeat of ambition. For a moment, she felt small, a single pulse, against the vast machinery of wealth. Then she straightened her shoulders. She'd survived worse than marble and glass. Patricia opened the office door, and there he was. Logan Whitmore stood beside his desk, sleeves rolled. Tie loosened the portrait of composure interrupted by fatigue. The sunlight caught the edge of his profile, sharp and distant. Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice lower than she remembered. Mr. Whitmore. They didn't shake hands this time. The air between them held a memory neither dared to name: the smell of rain, the faint warmth of a towel, the moment that should have vanished, but didn't. He gestured toward the sitting area by the window. Please. As she sat, she noticed the way his office was designed: minimalist, almost ascetic. No personal photos, no clutter, nothing soft, a life stripped down to control. Logan poured 2 glasses of water. I assume Patricia explained the nature of this arrangement. She did. Amara said. 3 days. Prescott Estate. Pretend girlfriend. He gave a small, wry smile. You make it sound clinical. I make it sound like what it is. Her tone wasn't cold, just honest. It made him pause. The way honesty always did. You're not interested in pretending, he asked. I'm not sure I know how to. The admission surprised even her. But it felt right. There was no point lying to someone who seemed to live among them. Logan leaned back slightly, studying her. That's precisely why I think you'll do well. She frowned. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. You design spaces that feel lived in, not staged. That's rare. Most people curate their lives like portfolios. You build warmth. Something in his tone softened, almost imperceptibly. Amara looked away first. Let's talk terms, she said quickly, opening her notebook. He appreciated that the pivot, the professionalism, it steadied him. They went over the details: arrival times, family introductions, expected decorum. Every word drew the boundaries tighter, the illusion clearer. Yet under the surface of formality, something shifted, small but undeniable. When they finished, Amara rose. Well, Mr. Whitmore, congratulations. You've successfully hired yourself a temporary girlfriend. Not quite, he said. I don't want a girlfriend. I want authenticity. People can tell when it's real. She tilted her head. And how will you know when it's real? He didn't answer right away. I'll feel it, he said finally, and the words sounded less like strategy and more like confession. That evening, back in her apartment, Amara sat by the window with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She'd agreed to everything: the payment, the conditions, the boundaries. Yet what unsettled her wasn't the deal itself, but the man behind it. He wasn't what she expected. There was something guarded. Yes, but also something searching, as if he was perpetually listening for a sound only he could hear. She thought of the rain again, the night he'd appeared at her door. She hadn't recognized his face then, only his exhaustion. Maybe that's why she let him in. He'd looked like someone on the edge of giving up. Her phone buzzed an email from Patricia, confirming their departure for the Hudson estate in 2 days. Attached was a list of designers for wardrobe fittings, travel arrangements, security briefings. The sheer precision of it all made her exhale a laugh. It was a business transaction dressed up as companionship. And yet, deep down, she knew it wasn't just business for him. People who paid for appearances weren't always shallow. Sometimes they were just afraid of being seen for who they really were. Logan stood on his terrace, phone to his ear. Yes, Patricia. Everything's set. He listened, eyes on the skyline. The city was a living thing, at night pulsing, unrelenting. No, she doesn't need the press to know. Keep it quiet. He hung up before Patricia could reply. He hated the noise of assumption, the way people reduced everything to optics. He tried to work, but his thoughts kept circling back to her, the way she'd looked at him earlier, not with awe or curiosity, but with something dangerously close to understanding. It unnerved him. He'd built his life on precision, on choosing every detail. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was being chosen, or perhaps judged by someone who saw more than he intended. 2 days later, the town car glided through the gates of Prescott Estate. Amara pressed her hand to the window, watching acres of vineyard roll past. The estate wasn't just wealth, it was legacy carved into the earth. The main house rose ahead, pale stone and ivy, sunlight pooling across its terraces. Logan's family home. The air inside the car grew heavier as they approached the entrance. Logan, seated beside her, adjusted his cufflinks, a small, habitual motion that betrayed nerves. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Are you giving me one?" she asked. "Or hoping I'll take it?" He turned to her. For a brief second, amusement flickered. Maybe both. "Too late," she said softly. "I'm already here." Inside, the house was alive with activity caterers, florists, family friends. Emily, Logan's sister, spotted them first. She crossed the room, sunlight in her smile, arms outstretched. "Logan, and you must be Amara. I've heard so much about you." Amara blinked. The lie was so smooth, it almost sounded true. Emily's warmth was disarming. She clasped Amara's hands, whispering, "Thank you for coming. My brother's been impossible without company." "Emily," Logan warned gently. "Oh, relax," she teased, waving him off. He gets that look when he's nervous, same as when he used to present at school. Logan's jaw tightened, and Amara caught it, that flicker of childhood vulnerability peeking through the armor. Something inside her softened. Dinner was a theater of subtle tension. Crystal glasses clinked. Conversation fluttered between laughter and speculation. Guests measured her with discreet curiosity, her skin, her accent, the invisible gulf between her and the Whitmore pedigree. She held herself with quiet dignity, answering questions about design and travel, careful not to overstep. But when one of Logan's distant cousins leaned over and said, "You must find all this rather new," she met his gaze without flinching. "Not really," she said. "Beauty looks the same, whether it's marble or morning light." Logan looked at her, then really looked. There it was again, that grounding grace, the ability to make spaces feel safe just by existing in them. He felt something shift, quiet but seismic. Later, when the guests dispersed, he found her on the terrace overlooking the vineyard. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of grapes and dusk. "You handled them well," he said. "I've met difficult people before." "They weren't difficult," he murmured. "Just shallow." She turned to him. "And what about you? What about me? Are you difficult or shallow?" He almost smiled. "Depends who's asking." "I am." "Then neither," he said after a pause. "Just practiced." She studied him, her eyes softening. "You don't have to be." He looked out over the vineyard, where rows of vines stretched into the horizon. "You think it's that easy?" "No," she said, but pretending's harder. For a long time, they stood in silence. The sun bled into the hills, painting the sky in bruised gold. The air between them pulsed fragile, human. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You said once you don't know how to pretend. Maybe that's what I need, someone who doesn't." She met his gaze. "Careful. Mr. Whitmore. You might start believing your own story." "Maybe I already do," he said. Something unspoken flickered between them, the faint recognition that the game they'd started might no longer be just a game. Later that night, Amara stood by her guest room window. The vineyard below shimmered under the moonlight, a living sea of silver and shadow. Somewhere out there, she knew. Logan was awake too, the kind of man who carried his solitude like a second skin. She thought of how he'd looked at her, not as an accessory, not as a hired facade, but as if she were a truth he wasn't ready to face. For the first time since she'd agreed to this strange arrangement, she wondered who was rescuing whom. Down the hall, Logan poured himself another glass of wine he wouldn't finish. He told himself it was control, that he was still in charge of the narrative. But when he looked out at the night, he realized something had shifted quietly, irrevocably. It wasn't just an arrangement anymore. It was the beginning of an undoing. The second evening at the Prescott estate descended like a slow melody, strings of laughter, glasses clinking, the scent of roasted thyme and aged wine drifting through hallways heavy with history. The Whitmores knew how to host. They'd been practicing for generations. Amara stood before the mirror in her guest room, adjusting the emerald silk dress, chosen by one of Logan's stylists. It fit perfectly, too perfectly, as if it had been measured not just for her body, but for the version of herself she was expected to play. She stared at her reflection, the woman looking back elegant, composed, unfamiliar. The knock came softly. "May I come in?" Logan's voice. She turned. He leaned against the doorframe, tuxedo precise, cufflinks glinting like quiet constellations. But there was something human in his expression, the faint uncertainty of a man stepping into something he couldn't buy or control. "You look," he began, then stopped, as if words might ruin it. "Appropriate," she offered. "Unforgettable," he said instead, and the simplicity of it startled her. The silence between them stretched, intimate and dangerous. Then he straightened, the moment tucked away like a secret. "We should go. My mother likes punctuality. She believes lateness is a sign of moral decay." "Then let's not offend morality," Amara said softly, and followed him downstairs. Dinner was held in the East Conservatory, a room of glass and candlelight, where conversations floated like perfume. Around them sat the Whitmore circle, polished, pedigreed, each word measured for its reflection. Amara felt their eyes on her, the glances polite but assessing, like collectors examining an artifact. She smiled when required, answered with grace, her voice steady, even when their curiosity cut too close. Across the table, Logan watched her navigate the evening with a quiet pride he couldn't name. She wasn't performing. She was being, where others sparkled for attention. She glowed from within, as if her calm had its own gravity. When someone asked about her design philosophy, she replied simply, "I believe homes should feel like forgiveness. We all need places that understand our flaws and still hold us." A soft murmur rippled through the table. Even Logan's father, usually a portrait of austerity, looked up for a beat, an idealistic approach. He said, "Perhaps." Amara answered, unruffled, "But it's kept me honest." The elder Whitmore's gaze lingered, not unkindly, but curious, as if studying the source of his son's growing unease. The rest of dinner passed in polished conversation, but under the surface, something unspoken stirred. Logan felt it every time Amara smiled, a small, disarming warmth that broke through the sterile rhythm of his world. After dessert, as the others drifted toward the drawing room, Emily intercepted them, eyes glinting with mischief. "There's a jazz trio in the garden," she whispered. "You two should escape while you can. It's the only part of this circus that still feels alive." Logan shot her a look that mixed irritation and affection. "You never change." "Neither do you," she replied, already shooing them toward the French doors. Outside, the night was gentle, the air sweet with honeysuckle and the hum of distant music. The trio played under a canopy of fairy lights, soft notes tumbling into the dark. They stood at the edge of the terrace, the rhythm wrapping around them. "Do you dance, Mr. Whitmore?" Amara asked, teasing. "Only when cornered." She smiled. "Then consider yourself cornered." He hesitated, then offered his hand. Her fingers slid into his. Warm, sure. The first step was awkward, the second uncertain. But by the third, they found something resembling rhythm. Her laughter rose like light. "You're better than you think." He looked at her, the world narrowing to that small space between their faces. "You make it easier to forget the steps." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. They moved together, the night folding around them. Her head brushed his shoulder. His breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the boundaries they'd drawn dissolved. Then the song ended, and reality returned like the chill of midnight air. She stepped back, smoothing her dress. "We should go inside." "Amara, don't," she said quietly. "Let's not ruin a beautiful moment by explaining it." He wanted to argue, to say something that would make her stay in that fragile stillness. But he knew she was right. Explanation was the enemy of magic. Later, when the house had gone quiet, Logan wandered into the library. He needed space, not from her, but from the pull she created. The room smelled of leather and old paper, the ghosts of his childhood lingering in the wood-paneled air. He poured a drink, but didn't touch it. His reflection in the glass was a man he barely recognized, someone uncertain, distracted, alive. He thought of her words at dinner. Homes should feel like forgiveness. He didn't know if he'd ever been forgiven by his father, by the people he'd outpaced, by himself. Success had been his penance and his armor. But standing beside Amara tonight, for the first time in years, He'd felt something dangerously close to peace, and that terrified him. Amara couldn't sleep. The music from earlier still echoed faintly through the open window, blending with the rustle of vineyard leaves. She sat at the vanity, brushing her hair in slow, thoughtful strokes. The night had been perfect, too perfect. And perfection, she'd learned, was always temporary. She thought of Logan, the way his hand had trembled slightly when he'd touched hers. The flicker of sincerity that slipped through his control. It wasn't charm. It was truth, raw and reluctant. And that truth scared her. Because beneath his restraint, she saw a man built from fractures, one who didn't know how to be loved without earning it. She knew that type. She'd been that type once. Her phone buzzed a text from her assistant back in Brooklyn. The studio landlord agreed to extend another month. "You're okay." She smiled faintly. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd agreed to this arrangement to save her business. And now it was saving something else entirely. Something she couldn't name. She stood, walked to the balcony, and looked out at the dark horizon. From this distance, the city lights were invisible. All that existed was the quiet pulse of the countryside, and the knowledge that somewhere beyond those walls, Logan was awake too. She closed her eyes and whispered, "What are we doing?" The wind didn't answer, but it felt like it understood. The next morning, breakfast was sunlight and civility. Emily chatted animatedly about the wedding menu, while their father dissected the logistics of seating arrangements, as if negotiating a merger. Amara sat beside Logan, her expression calm but distant. He noticed, of course he did. When Emily left to take a call, he leaned slightly toward her. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." She stirred her coffee, avoiding his eyes. "Maybe I just realized I'm better at pretending than I thought." He frowned. "Last night was beautiful." She interrupted gently. "Let's leave it that way." Something sharp twisted in his chest. "You think it meant nothing, I think," she said, meeting his gaze. "We both know what this is. 3 days. A role. A contract. And yet here we are, making it feel like more. Which is exactly why it's dangerous." Her words hung between them, soft but final. Then Emily returned, bright as a sunbeam, and the conversation dissolved like sugar in coffee. That afternoon, the first guests for the wedding began to arrive. Politicians, socialites, the kind of people who smiled without blinking. Logan slipped into host mode with practiced ease, shaking hands, laughing on cue. But every time he caught sight of Amara across the courtyard, her head tilted in laughter. Her fingers brushing a wine glass, something inside him frayed. It wasn't supposed to matter. And yet, it did. He excused himself. Stepping into the quiet of the garden, the sky had darkened, the air heavy with the promise of rain. He didn't hear her approach, only her voice, soft and steady. "You look like someone trying to escape his own party." He turned. She was barefoot on the grass, heels in one hand, rain threatening in the distance. "Maybe I am," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "You can run from a party, but not from yourself. Is that designer wisdom, personal experience?" The first drops of rain began to fall, slow and deliberate. They stood there, unmoving. The memory of their first encounter, the storm, the warmth, the fleeting connection flooded back like a ghost returning home. He took a step closer, Do you ever think about that night? Her breath caught. Every time it rains. Lightning cracked somewhere far away. And in that fragile second, something shifted again, the air, the space, the truth they'd both been circling around. But before either could speak, a voice called from the terrace, "Logan, we need you for a toast." He looked toward the house, then back at her. Amara whispered, "Go." And just like that, the moment broke clean, necessary, inevitable. As he walked away, rain beginning to blur the edges of the world, Amara whispered to herself, "Don't fall." But her heart, traitorous and tender, already had. The morning after the rain, sunlight spilled across the Hudson Valley, like forgiveness. The Prescott estate glimmered under a clean sky, its vineyards damp and fragrant, as if the world had been quietly remade overnight. But neither Logan nor Amara felt renewed. Something invisible had settled between them. Not anger, not regret, but the quiet ache of a moment that had almost become something more. At breakfast, they played their parts again. The perfect guests, the elegant couple. No one noticed the tension beneath the practiced smiles. Only Emily, ever observant, caught it, the faint distance in her brother's eyes. The way Amara's laughter didn't quite reach her face. When the table cleared, Emily tugged Amara aside with a grin. "You need air," she said. "Logan gets unbearable when he's hosting." Amara smiled politely, but before she could protest, Logan appeared behind them, coffee in hand, trying to get rid of me already. "On the contrary," Emily said, handing him a straw hat from the rack. "Take her for a walk through the vines. The reporters will be here later. You'll want some real smiles before the fake ones start." Logan raised an eyebrow. "You've grown manipulative. I've learned from the best." Emily winked and disappeared into the house. The vineyard stretched wide, the rows of vines heavy with ripening fruit. The air was alive with bees and birds, and the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet. They walked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that said everything words would ruin. Finally, Amara broke it. "Your sister's charming. She's the only one who talks to me like I'm human. Because she's family. Because she remembers who I was before I became a headline." He said it without bitterness, but the shadow in his tone lingered. Amara glanced at him, noticing the faint weariness beneath the polished exterior. "You don't like being who you are." "I don't dislike it," he said slowly. "But it's exhausting to live in a house of mirrors. Everyone sees a reflection they want to believe. Very few see the man standing behind the glass." Amara nodded, understanding more than she wished to. "And what do you see when you look at yourself?" He hesitated, someone trying too hard not to disappear. The honesty startled her, not because it was raw, but because it was real. For a man who owned half the skyline, Logan Whitmore sounded like someone still searching for solid ground. They walked on until the house was just a whisper behind them. The sun had grown warm, painting her skin in gold. Logan noticed the way light gathered in her curls, how her dress moved with the breeze like a slow exhale. "You're quiet," he said finally. "I'm thinking," she replied. "About what?" "About how different we are." He smiled faintly. "You think that matters?" "Maybe not now, but eventually." Her tone wasn't sharp, just true. Logan looked out across the rows of vines, stretching endlessly toward the river. "You think this is temporary?" he said. Isn't it? He wanted to argue, to say something defiant, but couldn't, because she was right. Whatever this was, it had an expiration date. The contract, the arrangement, the illusion, it would all end. And yet, standing there, he couldn't shake the thought that he didn't want it to. They stopped beneath a sprawling oak at the edge of the vineyard. A picnic table sat half forgotten in the shade, weathered. Simple. Human. Amara brushed a leaf from the bench before sitting. You ever come out here before? He shook his head. No. My father used to say, work is done in offices, not in fields. She smiled. That sounds like something a man who's never built anything with his hands would say. He sat across from her, studying her expression. And you? What did your parents teach you? She hesitated, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. My mother taught me that beauty and struggle often share the same space. My father. She paused, swallowing. He taught me what leaving looks like. The words hung there, fragile as glass. I'm sorry, Logan said softly. Don't be. Sometimes absence teaches more than presence. He wanted to reach across the table, to touch her hand. But something pried, fear, decency held him still. Instead, he said, You hide pain well. So do you. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither looked away. Then she stood, brushing off her dress. We should go. They'll start wondering. But before she could move, his voice stopped her. Amara. She turned. This isn't pretend. Not for me. Her breath caught. The breeze stilled. Logan, she began. But he stepped closer, his voice low. I know what this looks like, the contract, the money, the performance, but somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like an arrangement. Her eyes glistened, though she fought to steady her tone. You can't say things like that. Not when there's an end date. I can't not say them. He was close now, too close. The sunlight flickered between them, trembling like something uncertain. She whispered. What do you want from me? Nothing, he said. Just the truth. Her heart hammered. Not from fear, but recognition. The terrifying knowledge that she had one, and it would change everything. I don't know what the truth is anymore, she admitted. All I know is, this feels like standing on the edge of something beautiful and dangerous. He smiled sadly. That's how I know it's real. She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them again, the distance between them had vanished. The kiss wasn't planned, wasn't polished. It was messy, hesitant, achingly human. His hand trembled against her cheek. Her breath caught in surprise before melting into it. For a heartbeat. The world stilled. No contracts, no pretense, no titles. Just two people trying, for once, to stop pretending they weren't lonely. When they finally broke apart, Amara stepped back, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. We shouldn't have done that. I know, he said, equally breathless, but I don't regret it. She turned away, the tremor in her hands betraying what her words couldn't. You will. Then she walked back toward the house, leaving him alone beneath the oak, the air still humming with what they'd done. By the time she reached her room, her pulse had steadied, but the memory of his touch lingered like wine on her tongue. She pressed her palms to her face, willing herself to breathe. She'd been careful, always careful. But something about Logan had dismantled that discipline, piece by piece. He wasn't supposed to mean anything. He was supposed to be a paycheck, a performance, a way to keep her dream alive. And yet, every time he looked at her, she saw not the billionaire, but the man who had once stood drenched in rain, asking for warmth without saying a word. That was the danger. That was the truth. That night, a storm rolled back in from the river, quiet at first, then building. The house slept. But Amara couldn't. She went downstairs, drawn to the sound of wind and thunder. In the library, a single lamp glowed. Logan sat in an armchair, staring at the storm through tall windows. "You can't sleep either?" she asked softly. He didn't turn. "I didn't expect to." Amara hesitated, then crossed the room. The storm outside flashed against the glass, lighting his profile in silver. "You said you didn't regret it," she whispered. "I don't. And if this costs you everything." He looked at her then, eyes steady. "I've built everything to be untouchable. Maybe it's time something touched me back." Her breath faltered. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling over the valley. The world felt suspended between confession and consequence. "Don't say things you can't take back," she said finally. "Then stay," he said, "so I won't have to." Outside, the rain began again, soft, relentless, familiar. Amara looked at him, at the man who shouldn't have mattered, who somehow did, and for the first time. She didn't walk away. The rain did not stop until dawn. It left the world rinsed and trembling, the air cool with the scent of wet soil and wine grapes. By morning, the vineyard shimmered under a pale sky, fragile and reborn, much like the two people who had spent the night quietly undoing the boundaries between them. Amara woke to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. For a moment she lay still, eyes on the ceiling, her heartbeat trying to remember what it was supposed to feel like. The night before had happened not as fantasy, not as mistake, but as something inevitable. She dressed in silence. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, her own face startled her. There was light there, uninvited, unguarded, a kind of gentleness that came only from truth. And truth always came with a price. Downstairs, the house had already begun to stir. Staff hurried through the corridors preparing for the day's rehearsal speeches, seating charts, the endless orchestration of elegance. Logan was nowhere to be seen, which both relieved and unnerved her. Until he appeared. He entered the breakfast room without pretense, sleeves rolled, hair slightly damp from a morning run. He looked at her, not like a man greeting his guest, but like someone struggling to remember how distance worked. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied. Their eyes met just long enough for the air to remember last night, and then they both looked away. Emily breezed in seconds later, saving them. "You two are early," she said cheerfully. Fathers in rare form already lecturing the staff about champagne temperatures. You might want to escape while you still can. Logan smiled, faint but real. "We'll go for a walk after breakfast." Emily grinned. "Of course you will." Amara tried to hide her blush behind her coffee cup, but Emily caught it, the knowing gleam in her eyes, said more than words ever could. They wandered again after breakfast, this time along the back edge of the estate where the vineyard met the woods. The world was quiet there, except for the soft crunch of their steps and the hum of distant bees. Logan carried his jacket loosely over one arm, glancing at her as though memorizing the ordinary, the way she touched the leaves when she passed, the faint smile that never quite reached her lips. "You're thinking too much," he said. "I'm thinking just enough." "About last night." She shot him a look. "You shouldn't say it like that. It sounds like something we should regret." "Should we?" She hesitated. "We should understand it before it becomes something we can't undo." He stopped walking. "Amara, I'm not afraid of understanding it. I'm afraid of pretending it didn't mean anything." Her breath caught, not because of the words, but because of how gently he said them. "You don't even know what this is," she whispered. "You don't know what I am to you." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't," she said, her voice trembling now. "You're a man who's built a world that doesn't allow cracks, and I'm the crack you didn't plan for." He looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. "Maybe that's what I need." "Be careful," she said quietly. "Sometimes the things that fix us are the same things that break us." They stood there, the sun painting gold through the vines, two people caught between truth and consequence. That afternoon, the first of the pre-wedding guests began to arrive: journalists, family friends, investors who had disguised themselves as well-wishers. The estate transformed into a stage. Laughter echoed down the hallways. Cameras flashed discreetly. Champagne flowed like obligation. Logan and Amara became what they had agreed to be: a pair. Every smile rehearsed. Every glance calculated to seem effortless. But beneath the performance, the real tension lived: the secret neither of them could contain. At one point, during the rehearsal dinner, she felt his hand find hers beneath the table. The touch was brief, but enough to send a ripple of warmth through her. Across from them, his father noticed. After the dinner, while the guests drifted toward the ballroom, Mr. Whitmore approached her. His voice was courteous, his expression kind in a way that felt practiced. "You've made quite an impression, Ms. Johnson," he said. "Thank you," she replied. Careful, poised, he studied her for a moment longer, eyes sharp beneath the civility. "You're not what I expected. I hope that's a good thing." "It's interesting." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My son has a tendency to invest in things that distract him from what matters. Maybe he just hasn't decided what matters yet." For the first time, something flickered in his gaze. Surprise. Maybe respect. "Be careful, Ms. Johnson," he said softly. "My son's world is built on glass. It doesn't bend." He walked away before she could answer, leaving the warning hanging like smoke. Later that night, as the guests danced to a jazz quartet in the garden, Logan found her by the terrace railing. The air smelled of lilacs and candle wax. "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Your father spoke to me." His expression darkened. "What did he say? Nothing cruel. Just true." He exhaled sharply. "He thinks I don't know how to care for anyone without turning it into an acquisition." Her silence confirmed it. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Do you believe that I think?" she said. "You don't know how to love someone who can't be bought." The words hit harder than she meant them to, and she regretted them instantly. But Logan didn't flinch. He only looked at her, not angry, just hurt. "You think that's what this is?" he asked quietly. "A transaction?" She shook her head, eyes bright. "No, that's the problem. It was, and now it's not. And I don't know what to do with that." The band began to play a slow song, a soft, aching melody that carried through the night. Without a word, he held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved together beneath the fairy lights, the world falling away until there was only the rhythm between them. Every step, every glance, was both confession and denial. "I don't want to lose this," he whispered. "Then stop calling it this," she murmured. "Call it what it is." He looked at her, really looked, and said, "You." Her chest tightened. "Logan." But before she could finish, thunder rumbled again in the distance. A storm was forming not above them, but between them. They danced anyway, as if the world had given them this one reprieve. When the song ended, they didn't speak. She slipped her hand from his and turned toward the house. He watched her go, 1,000 words trapped in his throat. He didn't follow. Not yet. Inside her room, Amara pressed her palms against the window pane, watching the storm gather. Her reflection stared back, caught between strength and surrender. She wanted to believe in him, but belief was a dangerous luxury. And in that moment, as lightning licked the horizon, she realized something inevitable. Falling in love with him was no longer the risk, it was the consequence. Downstairs, Logan stood alone in the empty ballroom. The music had stopped. The guests had gone to bed. And yet the scent of her perfume lingered like memory. He closed his eyes, whispering into the quiet, "Don't walk away from me." But upstairs, in a room lit by stormlight, Amara was already packing her heart into silence, knowing that sometimes love didn't end with goodbye. Sometimes it ended with almost. And the hardest part was knowing that almost was never enough. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived wrapped in sunlight that felt almost cruel. The sky was too blue, the laughter too bright, and the illusion too intact. Everyone at the Prescott estate moved like clockwork, florists trimming centerpieces, photographers testing light, guests swirling between greetings and gossip. And yet, under the polished surface, tension pulsed like a quiet storm. Amara felt it before she saw it. The sideways glances, the low hum of whispers. Something had shifted in the air, a new presence, electric and dangerous. Then she saw her, Isabelle Moraine, French-born socialite, former model, and Logan's very public ex. She arrived in a wave of perfume and confidence, kissing cheeks, turning heads, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone forget who else was there, including him. Logan froze for the briefest second when their eyes met. He masked it quickly, but Amara caught it, that tiny flicker of recognition and regret. "Did you know she'd be here?" Amara asked under her breath. His jaw tightened. "No, she wasn't invited." That was answer enough. Isabel approached with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Logan, darling, it's been far too long." Her voice dripped charm, her accent turning his name into an elegy. Then her gaze slid to Amara, lingering just long enough to sting. "And this must be your companion, Amara Johnson," Amara said before he could respond. Her tone was calm, her handshake steady, but the air between them crackled like static. "Of course," Isabel said, eyes glinting. "I read about your design work. You're quite the creative spirit. I do adore when Logan appreciates art. He never did with me." The barb landed softly, elegantly, but it landed all the same. Logan intervened. "Isabel, this isn't the time." "Oh, don't be so serious." She laughed, brushing his arm in a way that made Amara's stomach twist. "I only came to wish Emily well. We're old friends, after all." Then, leaning closer to Amara, she added sweetly, "Be careful. Cher. Logan can be persuasive until he changes his mind." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a perfume trail and a silence that pressed too close. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the rehearsal dinner began. Candles flickered, music floated, glasses clinked. But beneath the golden light, Amara could feel the fractures forming. Isabel hovered nearby, graceful and lethal, weaving through the guests like a ghost from a life Logan had tried to forget. Every few minutes, someone would whisper her name, their eyes flicking between her and Logan like spectators at a duel. Amara tried to stay composed, to remind herself what this was: a contract, an arrangement, a masquerade. But her heart refused to follow the script. When Logan's father rose to give a toast, the air stilled. "To family," he said, his voice deep and formal. "To love that endures beyond appearances." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Logan's hand brushed Amara's beneath the table, a silent reassurance. But it didn't stop the ache blooming in her chest, the realization that no matter how close he sat, she would always be on the outside looking in. When the toast ended, Isabel's laughter rang out again, high, musical, deliberate. And Amara knew what was coming before it happened. Because every story like this had a breaking point. It came quietly. During dessert, a waiter approached Logan with a small envelope embossed with his company's logo. He frowned, opened it, and froze. The papers were printed emails, his assistant's correspondence about the arrangement. Dates, terms, payments, every word weaponized. Isabel's voice sliced through the murmur of the crowd. "Oh, Logan. Really? You hired someone to love you now?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned to them. Amara's breath caught. Logan stood, face drained of color. "Isabel, don't." She smiled, triumphant. "Don't what?" "Pretend this isn't what it is. A business deal dressed as romance." "Oh, darling, you always did confuse affection with investment." Emily's voice trembled. "Is that true?" Logan's answer came too slow, too late. "It started that way. Yes." But the but didn't matter. Amara rose, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She felt everyone's eyes burning into her skin, their judgment thick as fog. "It's fine," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "He told me it was just pretend. I was foolish enough to believe it wasn't. Logan turned to her, desperate. Amara. No. But she was already walking away, her heels echoing down the marble corridor, like the slow count of something ending. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. The stars blurred through the shimmer of unshed tears. She kept walking past the vines, the lights, the laughter now turning brittle behind her. When Logan finally caught up, she didn't turn. Amara, please. She stopped, but didn't face him. Did you know she'd do this? No, I swear I didn't. Her voice broke, quiet but sharp. But you gave her the weapon. You made me your story to tell. Your shield. He reached for her arm, but she stepped back. I didn't mean for it to go this way, he said. I didn't mean for any of it to hurt you. That's the problem, she whispered. You never mean it, but you always do. He flinched, as if she'd struck him. Everything I said to you was real. He insisted. Maybe it was, she said softly, but it doesn't matter now, because the truth always sounds like a lie when it comes too late. And then she turned and walked into the dark. Back inside, the party stumbled on, brittle and awkward. Emily found Logan alone in the hallway, the papers still clutched in his hand. Is it true? She asked quietly. At first, he said, his voice hollow. It was supposed to be simple. And now, he looked toward the door where Amara had disappeared. Now it's the only thing that feels real, and I ruined it. Emily sighed, her expression caught between pity and disappointment. Then you'd better learn how to fix what money can't. Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat on the balcony, the vineyard below wrapped in silver mist. Every sound felt louder crickets, wind, her own heartbeat. She thought of the way he'd looked at her under the oak, the way he'd said, "This isn't pretend," and she hated herself for wanting to believe it still meant something. When dawn came, she packed. Her car arrived just as the sky turned the color of bruised lavender. She left a note on the nightstand. 4 words. Nothing more. Don't look for me. As the gates closed behind her, the estate disappeared in the rearview mirror, a blur of light and memory. But even as she drove away, she couldn't shake the truth pressing against her ribs. Leaving didn't feel like freedom. It felt like unfinished business. Back at the house, Logan found her note. He read it once, then again, until the words blurred. The ache in his chest was familiar, the same emptiness he'd carried his whole life, only now it had a name. He folded the paper carefully, as though it were fragile, and whispered to no one. I already did. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, and somewhere beyond it, a woman drove away from him carrying the only part of his life that had ever been real. The morning after Amara left, the Prescott estate felt hollow, like a stage after the curtain had fallen, where applause had been replaced by silence. The sun still rose, but even the light seemed reluctant to enter the house. Dust motes floated in the air, suspended, as if waiting for someone to breathe them back to life. Logan stood at the window of his room, watching the fog cling to the vineyard. Her note lay open on his desk. Those 4 words, "Don't look for me," echoing louder than any accusation. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her leaving the curve of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled as she set the note down, the soft sound of the door closing like the end of a prayer. He had ruined everything. Not by deception, though the lie had been enough, but by cowardice. By waiting too long to tell the truth. Behind him. The door opened. Emily stepped in quietly, barefoot, hair unkempt from a sleepless night. She took one look at him and sighed. She's gone, isn't she? He nodded once. Do you even know where no? He said, and she doesn't want me to. Emily crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. You could still explain. Tell people what really happened. What's the point? His voice was hoarse. It won't change what she felt. She studied him for a long moment. You've spent your whole life building walls and calling them achievements. Maybe this is what it takes to learn that love doesn't live inside walls. He gave a humorless laugh. You sound like her. Good, Emily said, standing. Because she's the only one who ever made you sound alive. Then she left him to his silence. 3 days later, the wedding went on. The estate glittered again, a perfect illusion restored. Guests laughed, cameras flashed, champagne flowed. Logan played his role flawlessly. He smiled when expected, toasted when prompted, and pretended his heart wasn't breaking. But every time someone mentioned love or forever, the words hit him like bruises. During the ceremony, as Emily walked down the aisle, radiant and serene, he felt something shift. The vows, the trembling sincerity in her voice, they cut through the noise of obligation and reminded him what honesty looked like. When the newlyweds kissed, applause rose like thunder. Logan clapped too, though his hands felt heavy, because he finally understood what he'd lost, not just a woman, but the version of himself that existed only when she was near. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Amara tried to stitch her life back together. Her studio was quiet, except for the scratch of charcoal on canvas. She had been drawing for hours, lines overlapping until they blurred into something unrecognizable, a city skyline, a vineyard, a man standing beneath an oak tree. She stopped, dropped the pencil, and pressed her palms against her eyes. The ache hadn't lessened. It had only changed shape. Her assistant, Mia, entered cautiously. You should eat something. I'm fine, Amara murmured. You're not, Mia said gently. You've been here since dawn. Amara exhaled. If I stop working, I'll start remembering. Mia hesitated. He called the studio. Twice. Amara's hand froze. When yesterday, and this morning. He didn't leave a message. Amara shook her head. Don't answer next time. Mia nodded, but her expression softened. You know, sometimes people call not because they expect forgiveness, but because they can't stand the silence anymore. When she left, Amara sat there, staring at her unfinished sketch. A part of her wanted to call him back, to ask why, as if the answer would heal the wound. But she knew better. Some truths didn't close wounds. They deepened them. That night, she walked along the East River, the city glowing like constellations, scattered too close to earth. The cold wind stung her cheeks, but she welcomed it. The sting felt honest. She thought of Logan, the way he'd looked at her under the storm. His voice when he said, "Stay." The tremor of belief in his tone. He hadn't lied about everything. She knew that now. But the truth had come too late, wrapped in too much pain to save them. She leaned on the railing, watching the reflection of the skyline ripple across the water. You can't rebuild on broken trust, she whispered to no one. But even as she said it, a quieter voice in her heart, the foolish, stubborn one, asked, "What if you could?" Across the river, in his Manhattan office, Logan stared at a document he couldn't read. The numbers blurred. The words lost meaning. He pushed it aside, rose, and looked out at the city that had once been his kingdom. It felt empty now, a collection of towers, built for no one. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily: "You can't keep punishing yourself for being human. Go find her." He typed back, "She doesn't want to be found." Her reply came instantly, "Maybe, but do you want to live with that?" He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he prayed not for success, not for control, but for courage. 2 weeks passed before he finally drove to Brooklyn. It was raining again, the kind of rain that blurred the world into watercolor. He parked outside her studio, heart pounding. Through the window, he saw her head bent over a canvas, hair pulled back, a small streak of paint on her cheek. He stood there for a long time, just watching. She looked peaceful, untouchable. Maybe he should leave. Maybe Emily was wrong. Maybe loving someone meant knowing when to stop hurting them. He turned to go. Then the door opened behind him. Logan, her voice soft, steady, impossible to mistake. He turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know. So why are you?" He hesitated, because silence hurts worse than rejection. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain filled the space between them. "You don't owe me anything," she said finally. "I know that too," he whispered. "But I need to say this." He stepped closer, his voice unsteady. "What happened, the contract? The lies it started as something I could control. But then you walked in, and everything stopped making sense. You saw me when I didn't deserve to be seen." Her eyes softened, but her expression stayed guarded. "You broke something in me. Logan, I broke something in myself too," he said, "and I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to stop pretending I don't miss you." The words hung there, fragile and trembling. Amara's breath caught. "You think saying that makes it right?" "No," he said, "but it makes it real." Rain pattered harder against the windows. She looked at him, really looked, and saw what Emily had seen all along. Not the billionaire, not the man who could buy worlds, but someone stripped bare by his own regret. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Amara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust you again." He nodded slowly. "Then let me earn it, one truth at a time." She closed her eyes. "And if I can't?" He took a breath, the kind that felt like surrender. "Then I'll still be grateful I met you, because you made me want to be someone I could trust." Silence. Then, softly, her shoulders fell, not in defeat, but in exhaustion. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't close the door either. "I have a show next month," she said finally. "Soho. My first solo exhibition." He managed a faint smile. "I'll be there." Her gaze lingered on him. "Don't make promises you can't keep." He met her eyes. "That's the only kind I intend to keep." She didn't answer. just stepped back into the studio. The door remained open for a heartbeat longer than necessary, before closing quietly. Logan stood there in the rain, soaked and breathless, feeling something unfamiliar hope, raw and fragile, but alive. He didn't know if she would let him back in, but for the first time, he wasn't chasing an illusion. He was chasing redemption. A month later, Manhattan was thawing into spring, the city's steel and glass softening under the first forgiving sunlight. In Soho, beneath the arching brick windows of a converted warehouse, a crowd gathered around a modest sign, Amara Johnson Spaces Between. Inside, the gallery hummed with quiet awe. Light spilled through skylights onto her work, sweeping installations of reclaimed wood, glass, and copper. Every piece was a dialogue between strength and fracture, between what was broken and what was mended. Amara stood near the entrance, graceful in a simple ivory dress. She smiled when spoken to, but her heart was elsewhere, moving through the room like an invisible pulse. This show was her resurrection. Every sculpture, every line, carried the ghosts of what she had lived through the storm. The love, the loss. Mia hovered nearby, offering a glass of champagne. "They love it," she whispered. "You've done it, Amara." Amara smiled faintly. "I'm just glad it's over." But she wasn't, because part of her was still waiting for something she couldn't name, or perhaps for someone she'd already tried to forget. The door opened quietly then, and she felt it before she saw him. Logan Whitmore stepped into the gallery like a man crossing into foreign land, composed, yet uncertain. He wore no entourage, no mask of wealth, just a dark suit and the kind of humility that couldn't be faked. Heads turned. Whispers started. "That's him," someone murmured. The billionaire who had vanished from the society pages. The man who had once been everywhere and now seemed to exist only as rumor. Amara froze. Her breath caught. Her pulse stuttered. He saw her instantly as though the crowd didn't exist. Their eyes locked across the room, and for a heartbeat, time folded back on itself. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he moved slowly through her work, stopping before a sculpture made of curved glass and rusted metal. Its title, Unspoken. He stood there a long time, hands in his pockets, his reflection fractured in the glass. When he finally reached her, the room seemed to fade to a hush. "Congratulations," he said softly. "It's breathtaking. Thank you." Her voice was calm, but her chest ached. "I see pieces of us in every corner," he murmured, almost to himself. She met his eyes. "That's because you're part of the story, even the broken parts." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm honored, even if I'm the fracture." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "You were more than that." A pause. The air between them tightened, delicate and alive. "Can we talk?" he asked. She hesitated, then gestured toward a quiet corner by the windows, away from the crowd. They stood there. The city spread beneath them, lights flickering like distant thoughts. "I didn't come here to fix things," Logan said. "I came because I didn't want our last chapter to end with silence." Amara crossed her arms. "You already said your truth. Not all of it." His voice was low, steady. "I built a life out of control, every decision measured, every feeling managed. But with you, I couldn't control anything, and I hated it. Until I realized that's what love is, surrender. Her breath trembled. You can't rewrite what happened. I don't want to. I just want to live differently because it did. She studied him, the man who had once seemed untouchable, now standing before her. Undone, in all the right ways. You disappeared, she said quietly. After I left. You didn't try to find me. I did, he said. Every day. But you asked me not to. And for once, I wanted to honor what you wanted more than what I needed. Tears pricked her eyes. Unbidden, you've learned restraint. He smiled faintly. Only where it matters. They both laughed softly, the sound small, fragile, human. Outside, a spring storm began to gather, not fierce, just gentle rain against glass. He looked at her, then at the city, then back again. You know, I used to think redemption meant fixing what I broke. But maybe it just means not breaking it again. Amara turned toward him. And what if some things stay broken? Then maybe that's how the light gets in, he said. For a moment, silence bloomed between them, full, tender, unafraid. Later, when the guests began to leave, Logan lingered by the exit. She joined him, clutching her coat. Are you going back to Manhattan tonight? She asked. He shook his head. No. I gave up the penthouse. Too many mirrors. Not enough windows. She smiled, surprised. Where are you staying, Brooklyn? He hesitated. Near the river. I like the view from the other side now. Something in her chest softened. You've changed. I'm trying, he said simply. Change doesn't erase what I did. But maybe it can prove I meant what I said. She looked down, then met his gaze again. You once told me you wanted something real. Maybe this is it, the real part. Not the fantasy, not the arrangement. Just two people trying again. He exhaled, relief flickering across his features. Does that mean... It means... She said, interrupting gently. I'm not ready to forgive everything, but I'm willing to see who you are when you stop pretending. His smile, then small, grateful, almost boyish, undid her completely. Dinner, he asked quietly. No contracts, no pretense, just us. She hesitated, then nodded. Somewhere with bad lighting and good wine. He laughed softly. I know just the place. They walked out together into the drizzle. The city glowed wet and alive around them, taxis hissing by. Neon reflected in puddles. The rhythm of New York breathing steady and eternal. He held an umbrella above them, but a breeze caught it sideways, sending a scatter of raindrops across her face. She laughed, brushing them away. Logan looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had changed everything, simply by refusing to be impressed. I missed that sound, he said quietly. What sound? Your laugh. It makes the world feel less impossible. She shook her head, smiling. You're still saying things like a man who owns the sky. He leaned closer. Not anymore. I'm just grateful to stand in the rain. Their eyes met the same magnetic pull, the same quiet electricity, but softer now, earned. The light turned green. They crossed together, shoulders brushing, the city moving around them like music. Later that night, as they walked along the river, Amara stopped to look at the skyline, the same glittering stretch she had once watched alone. "You ever think about how strange it is," she murmured, "how the city never really changes? No matter what we go through," he nodded. "Maybe that's why we do. So something can—" She smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. A silence settled, comfortable, full. He reached for her hand, tentative. She didn't pull away. The rain eased to a mist. The world shimmered in reflection, two figures standing at the edge of the city, both a little broken, both still learning how to begin again. Amara squeezed his hand. "You know, my mother used to say love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who makes you remember you were already whole." He looked at her, eyes bright. "Then maybe that's what you are to me, a reminder." "Of what?" "That I can still be better than the man I was." She smiled, turning back to the skyline. "Then be him. Every day." He nodded. "With you, with or without me," she said softly. "Because that's how I'll know it's real." The wind carried her words over the water, folding them into the rhythm of the city, and in that quiet, shared stillness, Logan realized this wasn't a happy ending. It was something rarer, a beginning built on truth. Weeks later, in a quiet Brooklyn cafe, a small envelope arrived for Amara. Inside was a simple card. No signature, just a single line in neat handwriting. "Some lights never go out. They just wait to be found again." And below it, a small sketch, two figures standing beneath an umbrella, drawn in pencil and rain. Amara smiled, tears catching the edge of her lashes. She closed the card, holding it to her chest. Outside, the spring sun broke through the clouds, soft, forgiving, endless. Love, she realized, wasn't about returning to what was lost. It was about walking forward, hand in hand, toward what could still be found. The end.